If you're running a business, you probably realize that just putting your values on a wall don't change results. Behaviors in a calendar do. Now, the problem is as teams grow, values can sometimes get fuzzy. People think they agree, but sometimes execute differently. And the gap shows up in missed handoffs, slow response times, and worst of all, potentially an uneven client experience. So, in this episode, what you're going to learn is a simple playbook. Now, this was inspired by the book Culture by Design. It's for converting values into clear fundamentals, what we would call observable, coachable behaviors that anyone can follow. And we'll show how Ferris Capital Partners does it and how you can roll this out in 90 days. Now, this was actually something that I rolled out at my prior company, Mark Spain Real Estate. I had the opportunity to go to an event where the author of the book, Culture by Design, was speaking. And it really caught my attention because when we first started the company, there was like nine of us and it kind of slowly grew, right? So every year we're adding more and more headcount. Almost over time and almost overnight, it seemed like there was close to 50, 60, 70, 100 people. And you started to see that, the values that my business partner, Mark Spain, and I would talk about weren't always being lived out on a daily basis. And so this talk was just like timed perfectly because we were starting to expand into new markets. We were leaving Atlanta, going to Charlotte, Raleigh, eventually into Tennessee, Florida, Texas, and beyond. And so it sort of became critical in my mind that we had a clear framework, a real clear set of behaviors that defined who we were as a company. So versus just saying, here's the value, right? It's like, here's the behavior that defines that value. So let's kind of back up a little bit here. A value, sort of the why, right? At Ferris Capital Partners, our values are a genuine love of people, make wise choices, first class service, operational excellence, and speed of execution. Now, that said, we say those values are in order, right? So, we will not sacrifice operational excellence for speed of execution, or we won't, limit our ability to deliver a first class experience by moving too quickly, right? So it's like, does this thing, that we're thinking about doing, does it show that genuine love of people? Is it about our investors? Is it about our residents, or is it about our team? Right? The making wise choices sort of speaks for itself. But what that looks like is getting wise counsel, reaching out to vendors, other operators. People have been where we want to go so we can learn from them, right? First class service kind of speaks for itself. But now you can see the problem. I'm sort of saying, well, it kind of speaks for itself, but does it? Right? Like, let's dig in. Let's understand, what do we mean at Ferris Capital Partners when we say these things? And so that's what fundamentals are. They're really the how. So there's the specific actions anyone can do, see, and measure, right? So for example, some of ours are pretty straightforward. Show up on time. At the end of the day, you have an appointment, a meeting, you're talking with an investor, you're going to tour a property and meet with a broker. Just show up on time, right? Communicate clearly, right? That's another one. And close the loop, right? That's one of my favorites. At the end of the day, if I send an email, I don't need to know the exact plan, but just tell me you got it and you're on it and when you expect to get back to me, right? Now, that's for internal team. I don't want to put that pressure on our customers, our investors, or our residents, but internally, we have a closed the loop culture. Now, how that looks at the property level, just to be very clear, is that if a resident were to stop our leasing manager and say, "Hey, I've got an issue at my unit. I need some help." Say their garbage disposal is broken. The leasing manager needs to take that to the maintenance supervisor, log it in our system, ensure the maintenance supervisor goes out, gets the job done in a timely fashion, honoring our speedy service guarantee, which says we'll handle any maintenance request that does not require a part to be ordered within 48 hours. Our internal target is actually 24. We say 48 just because sometimes weekends things come up. But the reality is we want to move quickly. Now, maintenance supervisor checks the box, makes the repair, everything's good. What closing the loop looks like is the leasing manager goes back to the resident and says, "Hey, I just wanted to make sure everything was handled to your satisfaction." They ultimately were the first to find out about the issue. So even though the ball was put in the court of the maintenance supervisor, and even though they know it got done, closing the loop looks like going back and ensuring that the resident is satisfied and everything was completed. So just an example, right? But I thought it was worth digging into a little bit. So how do you write great fundamentals, right? For first of all, it's observable. Can I see in the calendar, in an inbox, on a walkthrough? Is it something that I can see? For example, we have a morning huddle every day at 8:30 a.m. Is the team there on time, ready to roll? That's a big one, right? And, look, stuff comes up. If you're running a few minutes late, you send a text message. You don't just leave the person waiting. You do the right thing, let them know, hey, my other meeting's running a little bit late. I'll be there momentarily. I'm sorry for my delay, right? Is it coachable? Can a manager give feedback on it today? Hey, I noticed you were a little bit late here, or hey, I sent you that request and you never followed back up. I think you got it done, but it's just important for me to know you closed the loop, right? Is it portable? Can it be useful across roles within the company, right? So something that applies to not only, in our context, right, investor relations or acquisitions or asset management, it shouldn't be a thing for one department or one person. It should be something that everybody across the company can honor. And is it possible to measure it? Not all of these are measurable, but if it's measurable, that's always better, right? Ultimately, hey, you've been late to multiple meetings here. It's starting to create a culture issue. Other team members have come to me upset about the delays. Can you get back on that? Right. So let's talk about some examples at Ferris Capital Partners. We'll dig in. So we say first class service is the value, creating an experience is the fundamental. So we say do the little things and big things that surprise and delight investors and residents. And we're aiming for repeat and referral business. That's how we know we're winning, because ultimately, if we do a really great job, deliver exceptional returns, but have an exceptional first class experience throughout, likely that investor is going to invest again or refer friends and family. So that's how we measure it, right? Speed of execution. That translates to the fundamental: show up on time, prep and arrive early, respect time. It's a non renewable resource. We only get so much time in a day. We should be respectful of that amongst ourselves, our investors, and our residents, right? Kind of like getting into some of the other ones, right? Be that trusted advisor. That speaks to that first class service, right? That genuine love of people. So transformational, not transactional. We always want to put client outcomes first, even if it harms us. So if we get to the end of a deal and we've got to make some adjustments to our economics to make sure our investors are happy, that's what we're going to do. Operational excellence, right? So we say faster, simpler, easier, safer. So we want to design processes that remove friction for clients and partners, reduce their risk, and just make it easy for them to work with us, right? So we can look at that on every step of our process. For example, we were working with an exempt market dealer. They provided a great experience, but there was some friction. It took a little while for the person to go through the process. It was like a multi-hour meeting. So we found another EMD that had software that allowed the person to get their Know Your Client accreditation check done simply by uploading some bank statements and tax statements and things like that. And so they're spending less time on the front end. That's removing friction, making it easier and faster. Now, a couple more: communicate clearly, honesty in everything. These are things that sometimes, like honesty and everything, you feel like, yeah, of course, right? But it's just very important, because sometimes bad things happen and we don't hide from it. We share people exactly what's going on. So, for example, we closed on our Largo property and within a few weeks realized that the well that served the irrigation system had run dry. Through our inspections, we thought it was an issue with the irrigation system itself. Turns out it was a well. Cost us a little bit more money than we expected, but we looked for opportunities to save in our CapEx plan in other areas. But we communicated with our investors: here's what happened, here's how we missed it, here's what we're doing about it going forward, and here's how it's impacting you. So plain language, no fluff, never hide from bad news. And then, this is some of the things that are like important internally, but I still think absolutely applies to all of our investors and residents. But we close the loop and communicate proactively. So don't wait to be asked, finish what you start and confirm outcomes. Let people know what happened. For us, if an investor reaches out with some questions, we're going to answer those questions, but then we're going to follow back up and make sure that they were satisfied, they had no further questions, and do whatever it takes. Get on a call, whatever we need to do to make sure that investor's happy. So, you got to make fundamentals live. You can't just sort of like write a document and stick it in Google Drive or Share Drive or OneDrive or whatever drive you're using. You got to talk about them every day. So, for example, at our morning huddle, we review one of those fundamentals every day. We actually have 36 today, believe it or not. So every day we go through one of them. And then once we're, back to 36, we loop back around to number one. So for 3 years, we've been talking about these fundamentals. Now, what's cool is I've added a few since we initially started. I think the initial list was closer to 30, but over time, things would come up. We would observe issues within the company, whether from a communication standpoint or whatever, and we'd write a fundamental about it. So we're constantly talking about it. Of course, in the hiring and interview process, we have interview questions that are mapped to those fundamentals, all closed loop questions, right? You can't just like yes or no it, right? Can you give me an example about a time where you effectively closed the loop on a big issue with the client and what was the outcome? Um, so we're talking about it in the hiring interview process. We also, on our update emails, when we're sending out an update to the team, we look to identify any fundamentals that were honored. So somebody did a really great job and they honored one of those fundamentals. We call it out. I actually put them in bold too in the email. So it's like, Georgia did a great job closing the loop with this investor. Here was the outcome. And, in our quarterly performance reviews, we always call out those fundamentals that people are either honoring or maybe needing some coaching on. So we're citing a few fundamentals in those reviews and giving some ratings. We also do that based on values, right? But then when we're drilling into the values, like, hey, you really did a great job with that first class service, but I've noticed that sometimes you're running a little late to meetings, and I'm concerned how that might impact our residents, right? So can you please work on that? And then, where possible, we try to tie some awards and recognition to those fundamentals. So, at the end of the day, it's all about, your team, right? And if you treat your team well and you honor the fundamentals and you set that example, they're going to show up and do the same thing. So, things like investor experience, right? So, making sure our investor updates go out on the 30th of each month, right? These are things that kind of tie back to those fundamentals of that first class experience that we're talking about. And then it comes down to things like our operational times, right? Make ready turn time, economic occupancy, work order processes. And then, of course, team health, right? Closed loops, et cetera, coaching notes per manager. So if this is new to you and it's a newer concept and you'd like to learn more, you can go to fulloutinvesting.com and book a time. We'd be happy to talk with you more about this. But check out the book Culture by Design. It'll teach you a lot about what I'm talking about here and give you a good framework where you can build out the specific fundamentals that'll help drive results at your business. Look, you could even do this in your family, right? What are our family fundamentals? What are the things we do and we don't do? So it could even be something you do just with your family, right? So for a 90-day rollout plan that's practical and easy to execute, start drafting your fundamentals, right? What are the things that just immediately come to mind? Then look at each of your values and start to break down those values into chunks. Like, what are the behaviors that you would like to see when you think about that value? If you're the owner of the business, you likely wrote those values, I would hope. And so you know what you were thinking about when you wrote that value. So just start getting into the actual behaviors behind that value. You could even do a workshop with some of the top A players on your team and sort of, talk through what are some of the things that are important to you and what should we be thinking about as a company. Make sure you're keeping language plain and simple. Remove any overlap. Sometimes suggestions are duplicative, so you might be able to pull them together into one thing. Then get these published, get them out to the team, talk about them in your morning huddles, your meetings, your quarterly reviews, call people out when they're honoring those fundamentals. Um, you can even do a quick training session on them. So, doing a 30-minute or an hour long meeting where these fundamentals are presented. If you work in an office, print the fundamentals out in a poster, put them on the wall. And at the end of the day, it's like anything else. If you just write them and they just get, collect dust in a drawer, then, it's wasted effort, right? So you have to constantly be talking about it. And the way I think about fundamentals is sort of that idea when you want to communicate in a large organization, you kind of have to say things 7 times, 7 different ways, right? So email, text message, poster on the wall, meetings where you're discussing it, quarterly reviews where you're discussing it, on and on, right? You have to kind of come at this from a lot of different angles so it really becomes part of the culture and just baked into what you do at the company. So, common pitfalls that I've seen is just like too many words. Like, just keep it simple, right? Communicate very clearly what it is you mean by that behavior, plain language. Um, replace vague verbs like be proactive with send status updates before the due date, just as an example. Make sure you have somebody who owns those fundamentals within the organization. At our company, that's largely me. I'm constantly talking about them. And another pitfall is just like no follow through. You write it up or you send it to new employees, but they never hear about it again. So it just becomes something that's collecting dust in a process manual or in the drawer, so to speak. So, just to think about it, right? At the end of the day, values inspire, but fundamentals scale. That's at the end of the day, right? So when behaviors are clear, coaching becomes easier, execution speeds up, and the client experience compounds. So, If you like this talk and you're interested in learning more about what we're up to here at ferriscapitalpartners.com, go to fulloutinvesting.com. We have a sample deal deck, a video that explains everything we do from start to finish, as well as an opportunity to connect with us and get on our deal blast emails. If you've enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe and share with another high net worth investor that you think would benefit from it. Thanks for tuning in to the Multifamily Playbook. We love and believe in you. Have a great day.